In today's video, I'm going to discuss common flash photography problems and what the solutions are to them when you're working on the job as an event photographer. The first one is going to be if your flash is consistently over or underexposed. If that's the case, most likely it's because you are photographing something with a lot of dark tones or a lot of light tones. If you're photographing a lot of light tones, so maybe a bride in a wedding dress in front of a white wall, well, you need to tell your flash that it needs to overcompensate by about a stop at the least in order to properly expose for white. You have to remember that TTL works just like your camera, where it's assuming it's photographing midtones for the most part. If you're photographing a bunch of groomsmen on a dance floor, similarly, you need to go -1. You also may be getting inconsistent results that are either always too bright or too dark because you forgot you had adjusted your exposure compensation from maybe the last job, etc. So always be mindful of where your exposure compensation is. Next, we can talk about what to do if you don't have any walls or any ceilings to bounce your flash off of. There are a few options, some easy to do but not so great result-wise, and some a bit more complex and maybe not really worth the hassle, although the results are great. The first one is going to be to simply diffuse your flash, so at least you're not just pointing your flash directly at your subject. If you don't even have a diffusion cap or any device like it, you can always pop up your little white card if you have no other option. The problem with this is that it's very simple, but it doesn't look good for a variety of reasons. One, your flash is now on axis with the lens, meaning it has no real direction, giving a very flat look. Two, your light is not able to cascade across an entire scene, and so it will look more artificial because your subject matter is most likely going to be lit entirely by the flash and your ambient light from a completely different light source, and they aren't really meshing so well. Next option, you simply take your flash and you attach it to a flash bracket. You can still diffuse it, but now it has some direction to it. I'm not a huge fan of using a flash bracket because I find them to be a bit cumbersome to install. I don't really want to install anything in the middle of a job on my camera. You could leave it on the entire day, but if you do that, then you have extra bulk you may not need. If you're a wedding photographer, perhaps it will make sense if you shoot your reception and everything else, your formals, and then once the cocktail hour hits, you can go ahead and add like a flash bracket because you know you'll be using it for the rest of the day. Your last option would be to set up light stands maybe in opposite corners, and you can create like a cross light. You can even use a bare bulb in that case. It's a very cool, dramatic look. However, it does require more equipment, a bigger setup, and sometimes I find it can be a little bit inconsistent when shooting TTL. This is one of the cases where I do think there is a good argument for shooting in manual. Next, what if you do have walls, you do have a ceiling, however, they're really far away? Well, simply put, you gotta just make it so your flash does not have to work as hard. And you can do that by raising your ISO or opening up your aperture, or of course both. I strongly recommend doing that. Modern cameras can perform extremely well at up to ISO 3200, even beyond. So I personally have no problem going up to an ISO 3200 in order to allow my flash to not work as hard, but also then I can kind of get a better ambient balance, I find, when I'm getting an overall better exposure without even using flash. What if you have walls, you have ceilings, but they have a color to it? Well, here's what we have to remember. Everything does reflect. Even black reflects a little bit. Of course, it's not going to reflect a lot, and the quality might not be great, but it does reflect. If a wall has like a beige tone or even a bit of a yellow, it can actually work to your advantage. It can create a warm light, and I don't mind that so bad. However, once in a while you're going to have like green walls or red walls, and those become a lot more problematic. Ceilings are rarely painted anything but white, so you can always just bounce off a ceiling and not worry about the walls, but then you of course, will have a less dynamic light source. I prefer walls and corners to ceilings personally. Of course, you can always shoot as if you don't have any walls and ceilings at all, and then use all of the solutions I already detailed. Let's talk specifically about if your flash is not recycling fast enough. Well, as mentioned before, you can always make it so your flash does not have to work as hard by raising your ISO and opening up your aperture. However, there can be other issues going on with your flash. For example, your batteries may be just really low. You may have a faulty flash, which I was using for years without knowing it because I was new to photography, and I think I dropped my flash at some point, I got it repaired, and even after it was repaired, it never really worked as well as it should have, and I put up with it for a long time. If you still don't feel like your flash is recycling fast enough for your needs, but the flash is fine, you might want to consider an upgrade. That is one thing you are going to get out of a more expensive flash. But also, you can consider an external battery pack, which will give you lightning fast flash recycling abilities. If you ever pay attention to like paparazzi on a step and repeat, because you might only get that split second where your subject is actually looking at your camera, you have to fire off a lot of shots at once. Those guys are all, or women, they've never been women in my case, but they are always using an external battery pack in order to fire off as many shots as possible. Let's talk about if your flash isn't firing at all. Might be a few reasons, but I will tell you one that happened to me, and that is because I had a habit of picking up my camera by the flash, and that put strain on the hot shoe, and eventually the hot shoe got loose. It's a part of the hot shoe, and what I had to do is flip it up and tighten a screw, and that's it, and now the flash made better contact with the hot shoe. So if you pick up your camera by the flash, often you may have loosened that, and it is worthwhile looking into, and it's a really easy fix. I think there's a video on YouTube somewhere. If you're getting ghost trails or a double image, basically what's happening is your flash is freezing the action, but then you're getting a secondary like ghosting effect of your subject matter. You can do two things. One, you can raise your shutter speed so that it is cutting out a little bit more of that ambient light, or you may want to experiment with second curtain exposure, which basically fires the flash at the second curtain of your shutter, and that will give it a more natural trail of light. So for example, if you have a subject matter moving across the frame this way, with second curtain, the flash will freeze the subject here and you'll have a trail of light there, whereas if your flash fires first, you're gonna have the subject matter frozen here, and then a trail of light going that way. It may not have a big impact on the ghosting effect. However, theoretically, it might look a little bit better if you have second curtain when your subject is moving toward you. But even so, you can still get that ghosting effect. So you're probably just going to need to raise your shutter speed a little bit. Lastly, you have a flash, but you cannot afford a diffuser and your flash didn't come with one. Well, that's really simple. You know, there's a lot of photography products out there, but they're really, if you understand the fundamentals of photography and lighting, you can make your own products as well. I'm not gonna take credit for this, but I used to work with the guy who basically created his own diffuser out of one of those like jug-sized milk gallons. And what he did is he cut it in the shape of like a fiddle leaf fig leaf, and a simple rubber band held it in place, and he loved the look of it. He swore by it. He could have easily afforded a diffusion cap, but he swore by it, and I remember on one job he lost it, and he was freaking out, even though he could make a new one, because he's like, I've shot like 1,000 weddings with it. But yeah, I've never tried that, but based off of what I do know about photography, I bet it probably does have a better look than this little cap. All right, that's it for today. If I missed any flash problems that you're having, please let me know in the comments. I will answer it. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for watching.